there, welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about Doctor Who, specifically Jon Pertwee years. And I've got quite a few box sets here. Show off. I've got box set 7, which is his first season. Yes, I'm a Doctor Who fan. I do buy the stupid boxes. Box set 8, which is season, it says second season, which introduced the Master. Box set 9, which is his third season. It's a very unfortunate picture in the front. That's very weird. I don't know why they chose that pose for that one. And then season 10, which is his fourth season. There is a fifth season, but they don't have that released yet. But in these box sets, you get the slip cover here, and you get the box. You always get a cover with the TARDIS in the back, and you get the discs here, and they all go all the way back. There's tons of them, so you get lots of extras on them. You also get a little booklet, which goes in. You get a booklet, and you usually get this inside here, which folds out to be the TARDIS. From the era of the show. The booklet just covers all the episodes and information about the episodes. So you get that. That's the standard for every box set. They usually release other box sets that are like cheaper versions of these later, but these are the collector's editions. And obviously I'm an idiot because I buy them. But yeah, I got into the Pertwee years. I'd seen them all already, but I hadn't watched them in order, and I got the first season when it came out recently, so I watched that when I first got it, and then I was like, I haven't watched the other ones yet. For a long time, so I started to watch the second season he done, then the third and the fourth, and then when I realised pretty early, I'm on a roll here, I'm going to keep going. So I went through that, and I went to the fifth season on iPlayer. Even though I've got them in disc, it was easy to watch them in iPlayer. But I used to have the DVDs, but as I get the box sets, I replace the DVDs and give them away to some people. Because you get the same extras on the Blu-rays, you get the remasters, get some more new extras. So, I mean, I don't even need to go beyond Blu-ray for these kind of things. I think that's the best they're ever going to look. But it's good to have them because you know you're going to have them. So, yeah, the Pertwee years. He was not my favourite Doctor. I mean, I watched Doctor Who as a kid, and I've kept watching it. It has its good years and its bad years. Like anything else, it's a popular thing. Like Superman, Batman, Star Trek, Star Wars. There's good years, there's bad years for stuff. You can know, and even within the good years, sometimes there's a bad story here or there. I was much more of a Patrick Troughton person. I went back and watched a lot of his episodes with more enthusiasm. The Pertwee era. I grew up in Tom Baker. I grew up in Tom Baker of the second half of his career when it wasn't as good, and I went back and saw the early parts, which were much better stories. And then I liked Peter Davison because he was the first new Doctor I had when I was younger. Then there's Colin Baker. The Sylvester McCoy stuff I saw some of, but at that point I was kind of off Doctor Who a little bit. But I actually had seen more than I thought I had. When I went back to watch them, I'd seen more than I thought. So there was probably one or two stories I'd missed, but mainly I'd seen them. But I thought I hadn't. And any new ones, I like the Stephen Moffat stuff. The Russell T Davies stuff comes and goes. There's some really good things, but there's also some weird tastes and certain things. So his stuff's like you never know what you're going to get with him. You can get something really good and something, what are they thinking? I think Moffat's much more solid. But I mean, of the new Doctors, I've liked Eccleston, Matt Smith and Capaldi the best. Really. Because I think Eccleston's portrayal kind of rounded out some of Russell T Davies' weirder habits in a easier way, at least for me. So we're back to the Pertwee season though, because Pertwee was a weird because he came after Hartnell and Troughton. Hartnell was the original Doctor. Troughton had taken it over and made it part of his own, and established that when you come a new Doctor, you don't follow the traits of the old Doctor. You've regenerated, so you're a different person, while having the same Doctorish ideals. You're actually your personality is different because you're a new body. So, Troughton was much different from how Hartnell played him. And then when we got to Pertwee, he was very different from what had come before. Normally, I find what you get is you get a straight-laced Doctor, then you get a weird Doctor, straight-laced Doctor, weird Doctor, straight-laced, weird. It just becomes that thing of it's like this is the pattern that actually keeps the show working. The only thing was when John Nathan Turner took over, he had a straight Doctor with Peter Davison, then went to the weird Doctor with Colin Baker, and then another weird Doctor with Festive McCoy, which was like he kind of broke the pattern a little bit. And it's much less defined now in the new modern era. So because Pertwee was a comic actor, he decided he was going to play this part straight. So even though like Patrick Troughton was a dramatic actor, he played the part comedic, and Pertwee went another way. So even though there's still humour in the character, he's a much more serious. Like from interactions with people, he's much more serious. He takes the drama more seriously. He's not moving around and being strange. But that's kind of limiting because the thing Pertwee had was he had a kind of chill. Even though he looked older, he had a childish glee about certain things. He was childish at times. He could be very childish. He could be petulant. He could be like. There was a wise man there, but there was also like a 8-year-old child who would smash things. So so even though he was straight, some ways he was straight laced. In other ways he was just like a kid in a temper tantrum. He liked his wine, which other Doctors didn't. But he also he liked all the good things in life. He had his capes. He dressed like a dandy, but he enjoyed himself. He loved his toys, he liked his car Betsy, he liked his hovercrafts and things. Pertwee was the Doctor went into a lot of the fights and was quite happy to do the fights and quite happy to jump down places and go on a motorbike and do this and do that. And apparently he had a reputation, and this was something they used to, was when they were on location and he had a vehicle, and if they were still setting up and there was no real point for him being there, he would go for a little drive to get rid of the tension of the day for like 10-15 minutes, then come back and start shooting the scenes. And it's like, well, if that's the worst you're going to get with your actor, that's actually not bad, you know. And if it was a bad vid with somebody, it might take longer to come back. But when you look at the documentaries, that was his kind of stress thing, was like he would go for a drive if things were getting to him. Which everyone has their own stress relief. But the thing is, watching him now in the order, he was a much better Doctor than I remember. A much more defined Doctor than I remember. And a lot of the stories are really good. It's like, I think there's a lot of the Troughton stories were either really good or not very good at all. It kind of varied. But Troughton did a lot of really good stories. And Pertwee did a lot of really good stories. And the first half of the Tom Baker era had the best stories. So you had basically a 10-year run where you'd have like non-stop good stuff. Hartnell had some good stories, but at that point the show was more of a chilled show, and then they kind of worked it out, became more of a monster show when Troughton took over. And Troughton had a lot of great monsters, like he did Cybermen, and he did a lot of good stories with Cybermen. He did some good stories with Daleks. He did a lot of base under siege stories. They took away from the historical stuff with Troughton and became much more monster based, and I liked the Troughton era because of I loved all the stories. And Pertwee actually kind of came to the end of that when that had run its course and the show was in trouble. The way it is now when I'm recording this, it's now in trouble again. But that happens a lot with Doctor Who. Sometimes it goes in a hiatus for a bit and then comes back, which may happen now. It's just like sometimes that happens, you know, with this show. It's like you can't keep on making these stories all the time and make them great. Sometimes the creative team needs a bit of a break and then come back and do more. There's just no way to continually put out great stuff. But they managed really well for a long time. So the team behind this era was basically Barry Letts as the producer and Terrence Dicks as the script editor, an occasional rewriter. And you had like Malcolm Hulke and Robert Holmes, two of the best Doctor Who writers, were working during this time. And because Robert Holmes would take over and with Philip Hinchcliffe to do the early Tom Baker era, which was the golden era. And Malcolm Hulke he'd worked from the Troughton era and he'd worked through this era and into the next a little bit, and he did a lot of good stories too. So it was like they had a solid base of writers they could actually bring in to do stuff for them. And Bob Baker, who'd come in, he was one of the newer writers they brought in, and him and his partner, they were doing stories every year as well. But you'd find with their stories, there was some good stuff, but they were still learning during the Pertwee era. They got more solid during the next era, the Hinchcliffe era. But they were still learning, so they had good stuff, but also they had bits that were maybe not as good. But also other writers come in, Robert Sloman, who came in to work with Barry Letts, the producer, because Barry Letts did one story a year as a director. Of course, he was a director primarily, so he'd give himself one story a year, so they would write something. Sometimes Letts would direct, sometimes he wouldn't, but they would do a story a year for him to direct, but they'd also write one. So there was a lot of like good, talented people there. There was other writers who would come in for little bits and bobs who would do a story or two. There was a guy who came in and did the Paladin stories and did some Troughton stories, and they were good, they were solid. And you see, you just had this sense of there was a lot of people there that could do stuff. Terry Nation came back and did some Dalek stories for them, which weren't the best Dalek stories, but they were actually, when you watch them back now, they're actually quite good Dalek stories. They're not amazing, but they actually are very entertaining. So this was a good solid base of stories they had here. And it's funny how you look back at them, because this is a massive influence on what came later. In a way you probably don't notice as much if you're just like seeing episodes in random order. So this first season started with Spearhead from Space, which is probably one of the best first stories for a Doctor. Robert Holmes wrote it introduced the Autons, and it was just a really solid story. It introduced the Pertwee Doctor really well. It was shot on location because there was a strike on, so they shot everything 16mm on location. They did a very good job of it. It was just a really solid story done well, and it set the groundwork for the rest of the seasons. Now they had a different production team then, who then you already had Terrence Dicks as the script editor, because he was in during the Troughton era as just a writer, and then so he was script editor, but a different producer who then left, and Barry Letts took over in the next story. But they already had a team like Robert Holmes writing this one and Terrence Dicks script editing it, and it all worked really well. And then when Barry Letts came in, he had a couple of stories been set up by the old producer and a certain attitude. So his first season was kind of half his, half the other guys, because they at this point decided for budget reasons to change it up, to do a Quatermass setup where Doctors exile to Earth. So you just have them dealing with Earth problems. So you'd have them dealing with the Silurians, which are these creatures who hibernated when the comet came and killed the dinosaurs. Now they've woken back up, and the Earth's been taken over by these apes who've evolved us, which is a very good story. And it's like how far they're going to go to take back the planet, and how far humans are going to go to protect their planet, because neither of them are alien invaders. They both have rights to this planet. Ambassadors from Space, which is just this kind of very Quatermass influence one. This was like almost lawsuit level Quatermass experiment. These astronauts disappearing or coming back and they're all radioactive, and it's like there's something wrong here and everything's kind of messed about. And then there's lots of interest about how they're going to do this, how they're going to exploit the situation. And then there was Inferno, which is one of my favourites, where it's like a experiment gone wrong, and they're going to drill into the Earth's core, and they end up going to an alternative world where all the good guys are all the alternate selves and the villains, and the Doctor has to survive that and get back to his own universe to stop them from doing something that will cause the end of the world. So there's lots of fun stuff going on here. There's lots of ideas. They had a companion, Liz Shaw, who was a scientist, so she could match the Doctor for scientific knowledge. But the production team didn't like that. They liked a companion who would ask the questions the Doctor could answer for the audience. So in the second season, Joe Grant came in and played by Katie Manning, who was a different type of companion. Now, they kind of, compared to what Liz Shaw was, she was a much less intelligent character. But actually, in the show, they actually made it like she came in basically as an assistant, but as the shows went on, she would learn a lot from the Doctor and be able to figure stuff out, and was smarter than she looked, and could be relied on by the Doctor to be able to do things that no one expects her to do because she looks like a klutzy blonde. So she was actually more clever than she let on a lot of the time. And because her and Pertwee had a fun team, because he was almost like her mentor, he was trying to teach her stuff. So that added to the atmosphere of the show, because there was a story within the individual stories, there's like a central story of him teaching her stuff. He was also had like the Brigadier and unit team like Benton and the Captain Yates, who were the soldiers the Doctor worked with within those stories, and he was a scientific advisor. So it was a team basically dealing with all these scientific threats, and it just worked. The actors knew each other, they could play off each other, and as the series went on, you do little jokes constantly about the expense of Benton, and there's also a sense of everyone trusted each other, and it just worked really well. It was his own dynamic for the show. In the second season, you also got the Master appearing. Roger Delgado played the Master, the original Master, and he's great as a Master. He's probably the best Master, because he's calm, he's charming, but he's totally evil. There's no doubt about it, this guy is evil. He's just out for himself. But he can be very nice to people. He can talk to people in a very calm way, which makes you think, there's nothing wrong with him, he's a nice guy. And he's not. He's got a goatee, a black goatee. But it seems like someone's uncle, and the way he talks to them, just very calming, very like, well, let's see how we can help you, until the turns come when you realise he's just a monster. And he plays off Pertwee's Doctor really well, because Pertwee's Doctor is rash, impulsive, like a toddler at times, and then other times very calm. And just these two, like this kind of raging monster who's a good guy and who can't control himself, versus this guy who's really calm, who's actually completely evil. So that just worked. It was just a great dynamic, and I think since then it's always like the Master changes to go against whatever Doctor is against. The Master in some ways has to reflect the Doctor in some way, not always, but it's like when Peter Capaldi's Doctor, it was Missy rather than Master, and when David Tennant was the Doctor, you had John Sim as the Master. It was a crazy Master, a really crazy Master. So you had different Masters for different people. There's other Masters around that too, but I'm just using the ones that spring to mind. Otherwise, the ones I liked more. But this Master was terrific, and he in the second season he was in every story. He started off with Terror of the Autons, which was a Robert Holmes script, which was a lot of fun. Not as good as the Spearhead from Space, the first time we saw the Autons, but the Master was there manipulating them. And one of those things was, is a story doesn't quite hang together, but as for scene craziness, it really delivers. It's really like, it does get a feeling of this story is there for a commercial purpose, and you just have to work around it. And the stories just became more interesting. You had the Claws of Axos, which is these creatures that come to say they're helping the Earth, but they're actually they're obviously lying, but what they're trying to do is actually quite interesting. And what you find was a lot of the details in these stories, even if the stories you'd seen, I can't know this kind of story, the details will all be different and fascinating. Like they put the effort in to make the details interesting, make the characters interesting, and have them dealing with like strange scientific facts and strange, weird angles, basically, to actually keep the melodrama going. Of the you have to have chases, you have to have cliffhangers, you have to have this, you have to have that. You know, you had the demons, which was a high point, which was the master as a minister who's trying to bring back this creature that seems to be the devil, but it actually is a creature called a demon that actually is very powerful, and he managed to use this. He used a lot of weird black magic folklore and have the master be satanic and have a village cut off from the rest of the world, and Doctor and a few of his companions have to try and figure out how to defeat the master within that. So there's a lot of interesting things going on, and that's the only ones I can remember specifically, because one thing I found was, best the early seasons, there was always a lot of fun things going on. It was always like every story had some interesting elements to it. It's like they're obviously trying to do good science fiction within the budget range. Sometimes the budget's stretched too thin, and you'd get the Claws of Axos. You get those embarrassing monsters with people in leotards, and it's dyed leotards, and it's like, this doesn't work. But the idea behind it is good, but the actual execution doesn't work. But that's the way it goes. This is when they first started taking the Doctor back off planet for like colony in space, where he's just dealing with like minor issues, like the issues of these people on a planet that's been exploited. That was Malcolm Hulk again, who also did the Silurians. Hulk did a lot of the socially conscious stories. And you got this sense of the Doctor dealing with a future world where humanity is spread around, but it's not exactly doing itself any favours by how some of the people in it are acting, is the best way to put it. And it's that I like the future stories. There was a lot of interesting things going on. There's a sense of humanity has spread itself around the world, but around the universe, but it wasn't doing very good things. It was still being evil, just the same way as other races were evil. You into the third season, you had the Daleks return, and at this point the Master was in it a little bit less, because they realised after the second season, when the Master was on everything, that they kind of had to, just not do that as much. Because they had him dealing with like manipulating the Chinese relations and all that stuff, with war relations and manipulating things to create wars and things like that. It was bizarre. But by this point he was in prison, but still manipulating things from prison. You had the Daleks returning in a future, an episode set in the future but coming to the past, where a mistake is made that causes World War III, which builds on the tensions of running with the world with China at that time. The idea of this conflict becoming something that will just make the world weaker and makes it easier for the Daleks to come in and dominate. I would say from season 3 onward, the hit rate is less. Like the first 2 seasons, I think, were pretty much extremely solid stories that all worked to one degree or another. Season 3 onwards, I think it was much more of a case of there's a lot of good stuff, but it was less memorable, really. You had the Curse of Peladon, where they have to go out and basically be to help deal with a community to join the international arena of aliens. Basically the idea of you're joining the EU or something, where so try to create this culture, join this cult into a move into a more modern world, and the whole idea of the kind of religion and superstitions of that culture is causing problems for it. So you things like that really worked. And you had the Time Monster, which is one of those really weird stories that for the first 2/3 of the story it works, but then it goes weird and ends up in Atlantis. And that was kind of the thing that was happening when we got to that era where it was like you'd have like interesting things and then it'd go weird. Because that one was a kind of slow story at times as well, and it was taking place around the idea of time manipulation. We find out this university or this research area that was very university tied, and it was basically around this big building that they could hire out for a couple of days, and it became this kind of thing of it was like you'd have stories that were maybe a 4-part that were extended to 6 parts. But that's when I noticed in the 3rd season where sometimes you had stories that were too stretched. So this one ended up in Atlantis and it was like, you didn't need this at all. This is extra padding for 2 parts. You did not need it. But you still had like good things like the Sea Devils, which were variations of the Silurians, the idea of these other creatures who had been underwater who are now coming back and they've been manipulated by the Master and to create all this tension. And again, it was written by Malcolm Hulke, who had done these other stories, but it was really well done. And so basically you had a bunch of stories that were really well done, but they weren't quite as solid as they were before. The 4th season was an improvement on the 3rd season, I think. The 4th season it started off with its weakest story, which was the 3 Doctors, which got by the fact it was an anniversary story, and it had a good idea of this Time Lord who was trapped in another universe, and it was made of antimatter, and he's going to destroy our universe, because he was trapped in this other one. He was trying to get back in, but him coming back in would destroy the universe, and they have to send Pertwee's Doctor to stop him, and then they have to give him a help because even Gallifrey's under fire at that point, so they have to send him the Troughton Doctor, and then the Hartnell Doctor has to help them from being trapped in this weird time eddy. The reason why Hartnell couldn't come into the story is because he was ill at that point, so they had to use him how they could use him. But that was the kind of weakest one. Then you went to the best one, which was basically after that story had a double hand, basically 2 great stories, and you'd have a finale story at the end, which was great. So you had the Carnival Monsters, one of my favourite Doctor Who stories, which takes place in this planet of it's quietly authoritarian, and into this planet comes these entertainers who have this machine that's full of like these little toys, seemingly toys of people who are going through these routines. It turns out these are real people and real monsters within this ship, and the Doctor is trapped in it. He has to go through all the layers of this machine because he's been miniaturized, him and Joe. And also, in between that, you've got the manipulations of this quite authoritarian government over the idea of entertainment. So it had a lot of ideas and a lot of humour, and it was just one of those things like trying to describe it is hard, but when you watch it, everything just works. It's one of those things that just works because it's always surprising. It's always these weird angles about how people react and interact, and how people see other people as entertainment, and it is wonderful. So it was written by Robert Holmes, written by Barry Letts. Then you had Frontier from Space, written by Malcolm Hulke, which was a space epic where these two, Earth and another culture, are seemingly attacking each other and preparing for war. The Doctor lands in the middle of it, and he has to. At this point, he's no longer trapped on Earth. He can actually go around the universe, and he realizes there's manipulation going on, and he has to try and figure it out. Of course, it's the Master manipulating, but he's trying to cause a war for a third party, which turns out to be the Daleks. But it's just really well done. It's just a sense of this universe that you've already got in the 3rd season a story where they had another colonization story where people are going to commit genocide in this planet. That seems like not that place where the human beings can live safely. They're going to do this thing to terraform it all, and it turns out the changes in the atmosphere of the planet is actually a process of the planet, and the life forms within it will mutate to change with it. And it's trying to figure that out and then stopping the villains from doing it. So they'd very set up this idea of this human empire that had gone wrong. And in the third story, this new story, Frontier Space, is like, this is the human empire at a slightly other stage, but still it's a sense of its potentially going wrong. It's got lots of problems, there's lots of rebellion within it, it's got lots of corruption. And it's pig-headed, and the Doctor has to deal with them and another race that are also pig-headed, who have been ripped into this massive epic war. He has to stop it. And it just works, it really works, because the stakes are high, and every time they solve one problem, there's another problem, there's always more problems to deal with. And all the problems are dealing with human nature and humans being obstinate and not understanding and not looking for the other side of what's going on. And it's happening with the other side too, and the other side seeing each other clearly. So it really works. Then there's a Dalek story, which was Planet of Daleks, which was a good fun romp. It wasn't great, but it's a fun romp, very entertaining, but termination. And then we finally had the Green Death, an environmental one, another Robert Sloman thing with Barry Letts, where it's you have Joe Grant, she's leaving, and it's environmental versus the this evil corporation who's exploiting it, and it's the toxic waste is mutating these creatures, these slugs, to become much more dangerous, and it's become computer run to the point where the computer's telling everyone what to do within this organisation. So it's based on a satire on capitalism running amok, where it doesn't care, as long as it gets the profit, it doesn't care what happens to anybody. And it's just like a total metaphor for capitalism at its worst. It works really well, it's very enjoyable. It's actually pro hippies. Even the Doctor at the start was like, hippies, but eventually comes round. The final season is the weakest, I think. I think it's fair to say it's the weakest. But it starts off well. There's a time where Robert Holmes introduces some Terrans, and the whole idea of this some Terran crashes on Earth, and during the Middle Ages, during the Crusades, he actually manipulates this would-be conqueror, but using future technology, and they end up going forward in time and pulling back scientists from the future to work on it. The Doctor realises the scientists are disappearing. He figures out what's happening, goes back in time. He has a new companion, Sarah Jane, and they have to bond during this time and learn to trust each other while they stop this little despot and his alien pal. It's a slight story, but it works because of that, because it's not like a groundbreaker, but actually it's a solid idea, and it's like they're basically stopping these two people who are greedy idiots. And it just works. It just works perfectly well. Not everything has to be epic. Then you have the Invasion of Dinosaurs by Malcolm Hulke, which is one of those stories where the effects kill it. The fake dinosaurs look awful, but the idea is good. The idea is basically that dinosaurs appear in this, in London, forcing an evacuation. I try to figure out what's happening with it. It turns out there's a lot of government conspiracy, and they've got the extreme, after the pro-green thing from Green Death, you have the extremist environmentalists who want to turn the world back to a paradise, to win back thousands of years, which means you'll kill all the people on the planet, but you'll save a few people, and they'll restart the human race, which is crazy but wonderful for a Doctor Who story. So it works really well, apart from dinosaurs that look really fake. But as a story, it works well. And then the rest of the season's just not as good. And you get a sense of everyone's leaving. Roger Delgado had died. He's the master. He wasn't back. Joe Grant had gone. You knew it was used less. And the stories just felt like they were moving on. The team are moving on. They've done what they wanted to do, and there wasn't much new ideas there. So, you had a Dalek story, which was fun. You had another Peladon story, which was okay, but had some decent action, but it was that thing of there wasn't anything new for the first one. The first one was better, so it was a bit of a drudge. But it was easy to watch the second time round. After when I watched it before, I thought it was really boring. Now I watched it recently, I enjoyed it more. But then you get to the last one, The Planet of Spiders, which is not a good story. There's some nice bits in it, but there's lots of bits in it, but nothing comes together. And it's Pertwee's last story, and he gets to do a lot of chases and fighting. But the villains are mutated spiders, which are not threatening, but they cause his regeneration and turn into Tom Baker. But it's that thing of, it's just bitty. It's just like, the problem with the Barry Letts, Robert Sloman stories is they could be bitty like that with like the Time Monster. Was a bit like that, but it was more concentrated. This one is just, it's all over the place. You're dealing with like meditation centres that are secretly evil, which isn't very threatening. Another planet where people are oppressed by giant spiders. It's not that interesting. You've got you're basically waiting for the Doctor to regenerate. That's it. You have a power mad human being, a bunch of stuff, a bunch of cliffhangers. But it hasn't aged well at all. I mean, I didn't like it first time I watched it again. It was like, it's still the same problems. It's still kind of bitty. So it's a sad ending to what was a very good run of a Doctor Who. Just that last season just never quite worked. It was meant to be the Master versus the Doctor, the final story. And it was going to, like, threaten the universe, but because Delgado died, they couldn't do that. So they had to do another story. Some nice stuff with the monks and things, but there's bits that are nice, but 90% of it's just padding. It's really one of those stories that's like, I think Pertwee out with his worst story, to be honest. At least for me. But his stuff's really enjoyable. I think I'd highly recommend going and watching it. It's really a lot of fun. So that's me on the Doctor Who, the Pertwee Eras. Definitely go see it. It's much stronger than I remember. And you've got the box sets. You can get the cheaper box sets quite easily on Amazon. There's a lot of good extras on them, and there's just some good. The stories are good. So that's the thing. The new series of recent Doctor Who's, they have the production values, but the stories aren't as good as these ones, which have much less production values. So I'd rather watch some of these ones than I would some of the modern ones. So there we go. That's me for now. Bye.